Ladies and gentlemen, glad to see you in large numbers. You're watching ETBFSI CXO Conclave, and this session is about how CFOs are building pandemic-proof balance sheet. CFOs are the financial backbone of the company, and they face tough time during the pandemic in applying zero budget strategies, scenario planning, and much more because nobody knew how the situation is going to be. In fact, managing the balance sheet is still very tough because uncertainty continues. In this session with the CFOs from the leading BFSI companies, I'm going to explore how are they managing the pandemic and how do they see the future. So, but before that, let me just suggest you and recommend you to please post your questions, feedback in the comment box on your right side, and also share your thoughts on the social media using a hashtag ETBFSICXO. So let's begin. I would like to introduce my four speakers to you. My first speaker today for this particular session is Ms. Upma Goel, the CFO of Ujjivan Small Finance Bank. Ms. Goel, glad to have you here.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Amol.
My next speaker is Mr. Niraj Shah. Mr. Shah is from the CFO. He's the CFO of HDFC Life. Mr. Shah, glad to have you.
Thanks, Amol. Thanks for having me.
My next speaker is Mr. Sudeep Bhatia, the Group CFO Lending Card. Mr. Bhatia, glad to have you here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And my next speaker is Mr. G.S. Agrawal, the CFO of Shriram Housing Finance. Mr. Agrawal, glad to have you as well.
Thank you, Amol.
So to begin with, I have maybe 3-4 standard questions or broad questions for all of you, and a few specific questions. Ms. Goel, I will begin with you, and my first question is specifically for all of you. And the question is, what is the major change that the pandemic has brought in the role of CFO, specifically for you, for your company? Ms. Goel, your answer.
Thanks, Amol. When I really look at the major change in the role of a CFO, let me start with the broader roles which the CFO is generally playing. So I'll go about talking about the four roles. One is more as a strategist, which is like crafting the corporate strategies, change management or change agent. We call it as a catalyst, means generating business values. Then comes as a producer, means standardization and automating our routine or the transaction processes. And the last but not the least is the guardian, taking care of and standardizing control and the compliance processes. With this pandemic, what I've seen is more of the shift where the focus earlier used to be equally in all the four roles, but during the pandemic the major focus has moved more towards a strategist acting as a catalyst. And everybody would like to be, and same is the case in with us and also in our organization, to become a catalyst, to be more resilient, and how you can adopt to the almost every day whatever is being changing in the environment, and making sure that you are being ready from the technology perspective, from the business perspective. That is something, but we have, I mean, I have experienced myself as a major change during the pandemic.
Okay, I think that was good to begin with. Mr. Shah, I will come to you. What is your view? How do you see the role of CFO has changed during the pandemic?
Well, I think it's more of balancing the long term with the short term. I guess at one level, the strategy is always long term. You play from your strengths. You figure out what is it that you need to do differently, tactically from time to time. And these times are very, very different. And in these times, the flexibility and agility is something that comes to the fore. And that's something that you need to prepare the organization for. So investing ahead of the time, and being agile to try and adapt to the changing customer preferences because of the changing environment. And of course, every business will be affected in a different way given the situation, and you adjust to that. But just in principle, it's about keeping sights on your long-term strategy, but at the same time adapting by being agile to the short-term situations.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Shah, for that. Mr. Agrawal?
Yeah. So the COVID-19 pandemic has been the most serious challenge to financial institutions, I mean, in nearly a century. So we as an housing finance company, we have been juggling some big priorities that require concrete steps to reposition now while recalibrating for the future.
True.
So we need to maintain our distribution and recovery channels open despite the social distancing advices by the supervisory and compliance function, which were never designed to work remotely from home. So to struggle and to manage between these things and keep your balance sheet and P&L intact has been the biggest challenge, I think, is from last 1.5 year. And especially to keep the liquidity afloat, to do the compliances remotely, sitting remotely, and without any paperwork, without any physical signatures. So this has been quite challenging, but we learned a lot of new ways how to deal with the situation now, and have been managed to do quite well in this last 1.5 year.
Okay, noted that. Mr. Bhatia?
Okay, thanks for that. Very good question. So basically, in these times, all eyes are on the P&L projections and the growth expectations from the businesses. Besides talking about various other factors, that have come out of the pandemic. So essentially, I would imagine that CFOs are at the center, of all strategies that the organizations are playing right now. One of the core challenges you can call that managing remote teams, because most of us are operating from various locations. People are working from their hometowns and whatnot. Overall safety of our staff, that definitely is a serious thing, and all investors, stakeholders want to know that what steps have been taken by the organization there.
Correct.
The productivity across the functions, that becomes an extremely important task, because all of a sudden you don't want that for the same revenue that you were expecting, you start hiring 30% more number of people. Evolving regulations has certainly been another aspect that I would like to invite your attention. So essentially, RBI have taken multiple steps and interventions with every step. Government of India have taken multiple steps, and therefore all the financial institutions and all other organizations as well had to adapt to the situation very, very fast. The customer requests and expectations have also grown multifold during these times. I haven't seen this kind of customer engagement, at least from the existing customer base, to that extent, because they need support from the organization as well. Besides that, the liquidity and cash flows, that definitely it's a given, but still this is something that everyone has been very interested in. And finally, I think identifying the strategic opportunities and look at the P&L projections and continuously engage with your stakeholders and also the marketplace, essentially how you are going, what you are planning, what you are expecting, whether there are any surprises hidden. So I would say, as an overall combination to all these factors, I think makes this role extremely important.
Okay, I think very meaningful thoughts from all of you. And as Mr. Bhatia spoke about liquidity and all, my second question was going to be about that. So I will come back to you, Ms. Goyal, and I want to hear a banker's view. Obviously, all of you belong to an essential sector. All of you worked really hard, specifically during the pandemic. I mean, we are still under the pandemic. The worst is not over yet, but situation is slightly better. But when I look at the banks, Ms. Goyal, the challenge is not the liquidity today. In fact, there is enough liquidity. That's what I hear from the bankers. But there is a challenge with the low credit. There is a challenge with the credit demand, specifically from the mid-sized companies, specifically from large companies. I know you are not going high on the large corporates or something like that, but the overall issue is with the credit demand. How, as a CFO, you are managing the finances, that one side you have enough liquidity, and on the other side, you don't see a huge demand there?
Yeah. Thanks, Amol. As far as the overall demand is concerned, or what we can say is the slightly low offtake, and at the same time, there is a flush of liquidity. Being a banker, the customers are also depositing their money in the savings account. So we are getting a lot of money in the form of CASA deposits. And what to do? I mean, having a flush liquidity definitely will have some drag on your P&L. But at the same time, you also need to make sure that you are there with enough liquidity to support your customers in case they require the funds. Now, when our businesses are being in touch with the customers, and whenever, I mean, depending on their requirements, we have been funding them. It's a very fine balance, and we cannot afford at this point of time not to have the liquidity and wait for the real demand, and the demand has started picking it up. It has to have a very, very fine balance. When I'm talking about the fine balance, how do we further make effective use of the liquid cash or near cash what we are having it? So depending on our overall requirements, since we also have the uh, funding available through the RBI route, and we can use the reverse repo as well as the repo mechanisms wherever there is a funding requirements is there in the system. What we have done is we have also deployed our cash or near cash into a what we can say is healthy returns. I mean, it's a combination of not something very, very high risk, but it's a medium risk, and making sure that as and when we would be requiring the funds, we will be able to liquidate those investments. So with that, we have continued to maintain a good amount of liquidity. I mean, equivalent to almost 10% of the balance sheet size, and making sure as the businesses are opening it up, as the customers' demands are coming it up, the business teams are being ready to have the cash in with them to disburse to their customers.
Okay, noted point. Sounds a interesting strategy, Ms. Goel. Mr. Shah, I would like to have your views specifically on the insurance sector. I'm sure, along with banks, the insurance sector also faced a tough time because the claims were really high, and in fact, most of the life insurance companies have paid a huge amount to their policyholders because the claims ratio was really really high. My question to you, Mr. Shah, is has suddenly, because it was suddenly maybe I'm sure you must have also disbursed a lot of claims. So suddenly disbursing huge amount through the claims have added any pressure on the balance sheet for you by any chance?
So Amol, extremely pertinent in the situation. Now there are two aspects here. One is the resilience of the balance sheet, and second is the impact on the PNL, which is, let's say, a little more transient given the situation. So as an organization, I think what's important is that, yeah, there will be surprises that will come on and off. So on an ongoing basis, what is the kind of resilience you're building in your balance sheet is something that will help you in difficult times. So for us, that's been the philosophy, and we are in the business of playing games. So we have to ensure that at all points in time, we are in a position to absolutely settle whatever claims come our way, and at the same time, not have volatility on earnings to the extent possible, and not have any sort of stress on the balance sheet. And that's basically a discipline which is a more long-term kind of culture. And for us, if you were to look at what has happened, there are two or three things to look at here. One is on the ground, how conservative or prudent are we in underwriting business, and how conservative or prudent are we in setting our assumptions. We are in the long-term business. Our policies run anywhere between 20 to 40 years at times. So we have to make long-term estimates on, in this situation, the mortality, or what kind of deaths can happen over what period of time. So if you are reasonably conservative in your estimate setting, then you build that resilience in your balance sheet over a period of time, which will help you cushion the blow as and when the situation turns bad. So to give you a sense, in life insurance, the embedded value is something which is seen as the intrinsic value of the business. And in spite of the current situation, the impact was restricted to less than 2% of the embedded value. And that basically tells you that the estimate mechanism is something which is working, is reasonable and conservative, and is not causing undue stress on the balance sheet or volatility on the balance sheet. PNL, of course, is a different entity. There will be impact that you will take, but even there, if you are making conservative estimates, a lot of the claims that you'll end up paying, which we did, were already factored in. Some of them, of course, were in addition to what we had anticipated. So we made fresh reserves for that. And when we do those fresh reserves, we also keep in mind what can go wrong going forward as well. So we keep learning. There is visibility to some extent, but beyond that, we are all kind of stepping into the unknown. So we have to understand that communication to the board as well as to the outside world in terms of investors is something that is key here as well.
Okay, noted your point. And ultimately, you're in the business of risk, right? So you have to mitigate and manage all the risks. Well said, Mr. Shah. Mr. Agrawal, I think your situation is slightly different from what Ms. Goyal told. Though you are absolutely into a lending business, uh, NBFCs were facing always a challenge with liquidity. One is, what is the situation with housing finance companies right now in terms of lending, as well as maintaining a balance sheet and liquidity?
Yeah. So in housing finance companies case, the liquidity has been quite comfortable since last 1.5 year.
Okay.
There were a lot of volatility in terms of liquidity 2 years back after ILFS and DHFL happened, and there was a lot of liquidity tightness. But slowly, it started easing out.
Mhm.
And right now, I think we as in Shriram Housing Finance and mostly the HFCs with our peers of our size or a little bigger also, they are quite flushed with liquidity thanks to the regulatory intervention very well in time and proactive measures taken by RBI by infusing the liquidity. Even the banks are flush with liquidity, so there has not been any challenge in terms of liquidity. The challenge is more on the asset side. So growing the balance sheet because the demand has been because of this sporadic lockdowns and on and off lockdown in some states. Some states are open. So there has been a challenge in disbursing the loans. There has been challenge in registration of properties. So there has been a slowdown in business on and off. However, in terms of Shriram Housing, we grew significantly in last 1.5 year. And in last year, which was completely barred by the pandemic, FY 2021, our AUM grew by almost 70% and our disbursements grew by almost 95%. So we have managed, this pandemic situation quite well in our company, and we are doing well.
Okay, noted, Mr. Agrawal. So, Mr. Bhatia, again, your thoughts are also very important here. You are again a bit different from bank and NBFC as well. You are a fintech and catering to a different segment altogether. How did you manage your finances during the pandemic, and how are you managing? What I understood is a lot of fintechs actually stopped lending, for a couple of months. So are you still going slow in terms of avoiding the major risks and going very, very, what you can say, with a limited, what you can say, push to the credit or something like that?
So thank you. So basically, the fintechs across the country, at least those who are in the lending space, they cater to a segment which is generally perceived risky. There are various innovative models that have been carved out by the new age fintech firms, which are generally not catered by the traditional NBFCs and banks. And therefore, by design, the overall businesses, in any of the fintech lending entities are presumably, taken a bit or seen a bit more seriously. In terms of the liquidity, I think, really speaking, first of all, fintechs have to operate at a slightly better capital levels, and therefore, we have been operating at a 30% plus capitalization. And that is basically a requirement from the marketplace. It is not only in this particular pandemic period, but the times came when there was demonetization, there was GST implementation, there were so anything that comes, which hits the financial services sector, fintech, because the underlying customer segment is perceived to be not strong enough, and therefore we have to always remain extra cautious. Irrespective, even in the regular times, we always remain sort of continuously on the toes and try to assess what can be the future risk. How much capital do I always need to build over and above the regular risk that we are carrying on the balance sheet? And what can be my alternative funding options? Equity is always available. You could see that whatever equity fundraising had not happened in the whole year, we have already crossed it by mid of August. So I think there are still times to come. The markets are pretty buoyant. You look at, say, Zomato. What are they? I think a tech aggregator, right? Similarly, Paytm is coming up with India's largest IPO. What is it? It's again, a fintech aggregator. So that is exactly in which space that we operate in as well. Essentially, one of the core things that we wanted to see whether just because there is a perceived risk, should we stop growing, or should we continue with a cautious approach? overall, the approach that we are always taking, irrespective whether it is a pandemic time or a regular time, it is always a cautiously optimistic approach because of the underlying customer segment that we deal in. Second is the underwriting models that definitely required a bit more, granular review, whether those same credit underwriting models will be good enough, in the post-pandemic period or not. Third is the situation has continuously evolved. We have all talked about the customer moratoriums and RBI interventions around making sure the adequate liquidity is available so that the required support can be passed on to the deserving customers as well. So all those things have happened, and we have done to our level best to make sure that our customers also have a seamless experience. And finally, I think it is also about for any sort of evolving fintech, we want to provide the returns which are slightly higher than the regular traditional industry because of the perceived risk, and therefore the cost of capital is also slightly higher. The expectation in terms of risk reward is also slightly higher, and therefore for us, I think these are extremely exciting times. We are continuously working on what can be next. And one of the core things that we thought could work very well is a partnership model with various banks and NBFCs, where we can take their expertise, their balance sheets, at the same time the agility and the overall origination engine that we have created can be combined together to deliver best-in-class value.
I think that fintech model or the collaboration with the insurtechs and the whole startup ecosystem has emerged really well. And I think every bank, every financial institution is far more aggressively, partnering with these new age fintech companies. Let me ask you a hardcore CFO kind of a question to you, Ms. Goel. How are you managing your cash flows? Are you still going very strong on your capex? No, let's wait for a situation to, give some rosy picture, and then we will think about the capex and the future investments. What are the calls that you are taking as a CFO?
So on the cash flow management is what we are looking into is the medium and the long term plan, and going by the overall cash requirements, absolutely we are very much in favor of investing more towards the digital, and that's something that we have learned during the pandemic. And it's not just the pandemic time when we have thought about the digital. Our journey on the digital side has been going on, and that's something what was our commitments onto the digital part of the overall balance sheet, where we need to invest into the digital side. So as far as investing into any capex investments, absolutely. What we are taking as a view as a CFO is please go ahead and make those investments, because that's something that's the need of the hour. And unless you make those investments, you make your organization resilient to take care of all the sudden shocks which we have been going through in the last 1.5 years. We will not be future ready. And today the situation has come that you need to have your digital well in place to have that competitive advantage, to have your customer experiencing, or not only this, but I can say the qualitative factors, but even onto if you're looking into the operating costs, the more you invest into the digital, the more you move towards the end-to-end digitization processes, you really benefit a lot by way of enhancement in the productivity, which in turn reduce your operating costs. So when the cash flows are concerned, yes, we have the excess of the interest rates are at present are benign, and we also have the access to the low cost of funds. This is the right time where we are also investing wherever it is required to further strengthen or make our balance sheet more resilient and being prepared ourselves for the future.
Okay. Mr. Shah, how are you managing your cash flows, and any guidance or outlook on the capex future investments? Will you go slow, or you are just doing it?
No, completely echo Uma's thoughts here. And I did mention earlier as well, investment is something that we need to do ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of prepare yourself for it. Overnight, you think about investing, you'll not be able to unless you really build that kind of ability to do that. We've been fortunate to have the scale and ability to do that, double down in a time like this to be able to do the end-to-end digitization that we are all kind of speaking about, right from getting customer journeys sorted to integrating with our partners. We have over 300 partnerships, and we are fortunate to have 2 of the panel members organization as our partners, very esteemed partners, G1 Finance as well as Lending Card. So it's something that is extremely important for our partners as well, that we are integrated deeply into their ecosystem, because ours is a secondary product. Their business is what it is. So we have to ensure that we are integrated well into that. And that takes time and takes investment. And we keep learning from each partnership. And it's just something that we need to do on an ongoing basis. Of course, we were extremely prudent in BAU expenses when the time was very difficult in, let's say, Q1 of last year when this whole situation hit us. So we definitely decided to go slow on, say, hiring or, not announcing increments, or senior management taking, some cuts. So those were things that we were absolutely comfortable doing, but not cutting down on investments. So that's really the approach we followed, and that's something that we, as the year started, becoming better, all of those aspects also started normalizing, and all the leverage that comes through from scale and digital investments is something that we are now seeing the benefit of.
I think very well insights, Mr. Shah. Mr. Agrawal, are you, again, first is obviously cashless. I want your observations there. And how are you, looking at cost? Are you holding your levers? Because, your industry has a lot of partnerships with the, not just fintechs, but also with a lot of agents and all, which also adds to a lot of cost. So are you holding a levers in terms of maintaining the cost over there?
Yeah, so in terms of liquidity, we are quite comfortable. So cash flows are not an issue. But yes, to manage it, so managing balance sheet is much easier in this pandemic situation than to manage the P&L. So there has been stress on the P&L definitely, because our revenues have got depleted because of the increased delinquencies. The customers' cash flows were impacted. So we had to keep complete focus on collections. So a lot of digitization effort has been taken by us, in terms of new sourcing. So origination cost, we started projects. So how we can reduce our origination cost. So we made a lot of significant investment in terms of your bureau integration, your video PD tool, like where we do the personal discussion with the customer online, completely on the video without meeting him physically. We try to reduce the major cost of our origination was traveling and conveyance. So we put a complete restriction on traveling and conveyance. Most of the meetings are done by the digital routes, like Zoom or other team meeting and other meetings. So we try to cut down on those costs. Yes, hiring, we put a complete stop on the hiring for some time. Then again, when the first wave was over and the business started looking up, then we again continued with the hiring. So we managed to control our cost in significant way by looking at the lot of innovative options.
Noted, Mr. Agrawal. Mr. Bhatia, how is it with you? I mean, at one side, you have a benefit of the customer acquisition cost is very less for you because you have the digital formats ready and all. But again, the sales were down, the businesses were not happening. So how are you managing your cash flow over there? And going ahead, what is strategy? What is going to be your strategy in terms of managing the cost?
Sure. So essentially, there are 2 things. Number one, being a fintech startup, and we always make sure that we remain pretty conservative on the expenses when it, whatever is not revenue earning. And therefore, on the cost side, we have always remained cautious, and we have always, we have never let the cost go out of control. In fact, the kind of MISs and the scrutiny, that our P&L would go through is really, really, best in class, I would say. For us, the cash outflows are primarily 2 main areas. Number one is the investments in technology. And, that is one thing, being a fintech, if you do not think long-term, and if you do not invest into your technology, I think then in the short run, you may be okay, but in the long term, you can actually, you are risking the entire business proposition. And therefore, that is one thing that we did not want to compromise. And on the tech side, while the rest of the business wasn't pumping as much, the tech teams had even better window of opportunity to invest and to think about new strategies on once the pandemic is over or near over, what is it that we can go out, to the market with. So that was one. Second is our, second portion of cash flows also happen on the new customer acquisition and disbursement. And therefore, whatever we are basically lending, we are earning the spread on it. So while, during the pandemic times, the demand, as you mentioned, most of the demand was coming to repay their existing obligations. And that is not something that we wanted to cater. We wanted to cater for business growth. And, when the businesses really want to deploy this capital for revenue, for earning more revenues. And therefore, this one aspect we were trying to fiddle with, and ultimately this partnership driven model that, I mentioned before, speaking with various banks, various NBFCs who have large balance sheets and who can give the cost advantage to us in terms of cost of borrowing. And so we partner with them. We have this origination capability pan India, which other NBFCs do not have. But at the same time, the partner can provide the balance sheet, and that means that they can disburse the loans from their balance sheet. We are bringing the customers, and therefore it becomes a win-win situation for everyone. We are happy because we are not losing any business opportunity. Customers happy because they are getting access to capital at reasonable cost of funds. Banks are happy because they are also, instead of going physical, they can also, grow their balance sheet.
Okay. Again, meaningful thoughts, Mr. Bhatia. My next question is more about, I'm trying to just view two dots here. I mean, connect two dots or, viewing two dots here. Being a CFO, okay, I mean, obviously, you deal with a lot of, apart from dealing with the company and the finances, deal with a lot of regulatory compliances, whether tax authorities or the regulators and all. So, Ms. Goyal, if I ask you a straightforward, thing that as a CFO, do you think that there are some compliance which should be relaxed from the government? Maybe it's GST because still it's digital and everything, but still there are a lot of issues with it. Or from RBI side, obviously they have their own compliances. If I ask you straightforward, what are those maybe 4 or 5 areas where you think that the policyholder should relax some compliances considering the challenges that you are facing in the pandemic as a CFO, which will help you, in fact, to strengthen your balance sheet or will get some leeway to, make your balance sheet or scale up your balance sheet?
From the policy perspective, I personally feel that we have got a good number of relaxations, and the government has really come forward and supported during the difficult times. Looking at further relaxation is it's something like last year we have gone through the whole cycle of pandemic, whereby the government has come out with a moratorium or the payment holidays to the customers that help them. The larger thing is, if it is possible from the economy perspective, whether the direct debits or some direct benefits or the credits can go directly into the customer's account. So especially the micro and the small enterprises, those who are still going through a very, very difficult phase, they require some support. It's in the form of a grant or the subsidy. We do have ECLGS schemes whereby there has been a public guarantee on the funds which you're being funding them. Apart from them, they definitely need some sort of a grant or some sort of a subsidy, which will help them, to go back and, survive, move back into the survival mode. And that will help them. I mean, it's a what I can say is it's a revolving activity. The more subsidies goes into the systems, the more capable they will become, and then that's how the overall income, whether it is employment generation or the all other economic activities, that will come up. On the policies or all other returns, what the regulators are asking, to be very, very candid with you, I personally feel these are the good data points which they are also monitoring, and we as a bank are also looking into those data points that help us to prepare for the, there should not be sudden shocks or sudden eventualities. So when we are looking into where are we onto the liquidity position, where are we onto the credit cost, where are we onto the overall offtake, which is the credit offtake, that help us also to look into the, is there any concentration risk which we are being, risking our balance sheets because of that slightly higher concentration risk. I personally feel that the data which is being asked is it's useful both from the institution perspective as well as from the regulator perspective.
Okay. Any thoughts here from your side, Mr. Shah? Any
So,
relaxation that you are looking from maybe IRD or some policymakers? I do understand the IRD doesn't have a chairman right now since last 3 months, but anything else that you think that you may help as an insurance company to grow ahead?
So clearly, from an idea perspective, they have been extremely collaborative in this period, and they have been in normal course as well, but even more so in this period, where they've taken feedback from companies on a regular basis. It's a calendarized set of meetings that they've had, specifically focusing on what initiatives or what are the changes that will help policyholders, continue being serviced without being affected, and get the companies back on track in terms of generating new business as well. So there have been quite a few initiatives the government's taken, IRDA has taken with the payment moratorium. We saw a premium. There was a time where they were given more time to ensure that their policies are still kept live. Well, they had some sort of cash crunch earlier in the last year, but with time, things have been better than what was anticipated. So that was definitely useful. Also, alongside that, for new business generation, there was dispensation given in terms of requiring wet signatures at the time of originating new business. That was definitely, helpful in terms of certain channels and certain lines of doing business. And alongside that, there have been a lot of other initiatives which they have taken on board in terms of our feedback. Apart from that, I think at a more broader level, as a listed company, we have been able to conduct all our governance meetings digitally, including the AGM. Now, that is something which is extremely important from both individual shareholders primarily and also the large shareholders. And that's something which was facilitated by the MCA and SEBI as well. So I think the regulatory authorities and the government has been fairly cognizant of the challenges that all of us would face, and they've taken the steps required.
Okay, noted, Mr. Shah. Mr. Agrawal, anything from you, specifically from the HFC or NBFC side?
Yeah, so from HFC side, I mean, in terms of liquidity and in terms of other support like government announced moratorium and standstill of DPDs, so those were the very welcome steps taken by the regulators well in time, and that has helped us in shaping up our P&L and our balance sheets. So one thing which HFCs are facing largely the issue on, and especially the mid-size NBFCs like ours, is the very fast rundown of my portfolio because of the foreclosures and prepayments. So we as a HFC, like we are mostly into informal segment, where we onboard the credit unworthy customers into, we bring them into the regular channel of lending cycle. So once we onboard a customer 1 to 2 years, they build up their statement and their credit worthiness, and then they get poached by the larger players. So there is no, there is no outgoing restriction on those customers because we cannot charge a prepayment penalty or anything. So we have been requesting NHB and RBI from a long time to impose prepayment. At least some exit barrier should be created, so that when we are taking that kind of risk on those type of customers who are completely into informal segment, and we bring them into the formal segment, so they need to stay with us for a little longer time. So that's the request we have been making from NHB, but somehow, I mean, it's not being considered favorably.
No, I in fact understand. There is always a debate and argument between the RBI, NBFCs, HFCs compared to banks. Perhaps banks, get some things very smoothly and seamlessly. Uh, Mr. Bhatia, fortunately or maybe unfortunately, you don't have to follow a lot of regulations which the other panelists are following. So let me tweak that question to you. Is it a great benefit that you have because you do not have to follow hundreds of compliances? Does that help you to, maybe look at your balance sheet far more, in a meaningful manner and build it the way you want to?
Okay, so essentially in our group, there are three entities. One entity which is technology entity, which is not under the regulation, which is only under MCA. On the other side, there are two entities which are regulated entities, and therefore, anything. So we have a systemically important NBFC registered with RBI, and that is where we have created this entire borrowing and lending program. And therefore, I would say it is heavily regulated. In fact, there are certain other technology companies who are, who have tried to do business and, who are not regulated. And therefore, the scrutiny on the registered fintech is even stronger. And therefore, I would say that, I would like to mention that the regulators are engaged with us so much that almost on a monthly basis, we have these calls on what is happening in the business, how are you growing, what are your plans, what are your major market releases, what are the new things that you are coming up to the market with. And regulators want to know most of these things even before these are out for the market. And therefore, I think they are pretty glued in. In terms of the regulation per se, I think during, as I mentioned, that these have consistently evolved in terms of moratoriums, then in terms of the restructuring 1.0, then 2.0. And even after this, I think the government of India came out with certain additional things like ECLGS schemes. So various schemes have been rolled out, and regulators want to know how we are doing. Even before the schemes are rolled out, they want to understand the feedback and whether this is a good scheme, can we tweak it to get to enhance the benefit to maximum masses. So overall, I would say that regulators have remained pretty proactive, and at the same time, they have done several right things for the NBFCs, for all the regulated entities as well.
Okay, noted, Mr. Bhatia. In fact, I don't know how the time is actually flying, watch is ticking, but I will take one very important question with all of you. Obviously, I partly asked this question. That was, in fact, my first question. But let's talk more about the future and let's take an overview of next 1 to 2 years. So, Ms. Goyal, if I come back to you, and this question obviously is for everybody. How are you going to make a resilient balance sheet? What are the major factors that you are going to adopt in next 1 to 2 years so that you may make a pandemic proof balance sheet? I'm so sure, it's going to be really tricky. You cannot make a pandemic proof balance sheet, but at least you can, maybe hedge all the risks. You can actually deal with all the unprecedented risks. So how are you going to make resilient balance sheet? How are you going to see your balance sheet in next 1 to 2 years? What are the calls that you're going to take? And this question is for everyone. I'm starting with you, Ms. Goyal.
Thanks, Samit. To make the balance sheet as more resilient, so what are we doing it and what we are proposing to do as we are going ahead? First thing is we all talk about the liquidity and the cash and the near cash. That remains the it's like an oxygen for any business. So we will definitely continue to have a strong liquidity position, continue to peak onto the balance sheet size. Onto balance sheet side or the asset size. Apart from that, we are also looking at having a very, very efficient working capital management. That means my inflows from my operating businesses should be good enough to take care of my current liabilities. So this is something what we are working, and we will continue to work to have a very, very resilient balance sheet whereby we'll start getting the benefit of having the cash flows generated from my operating activities. then comes my what is my capital structure? Very, very balanced capital structure. What would be the right mix of capital as well as on the debt side? And when I'm looking into this right balance of the equity and the debt, what we are looking forward is to have a sufficient and the good amount of long-term funding to take care of my asset side of the balance sheet, and it will also help me to take care of the few shocks which may come up, and we now need to be prepared ourselves for the any eventualities. Then comes the my investments, and what I was already talking about is definitely investment on the digital side is the need of the hour, and we will continue to make our balance sheet and continue to invest into this particular area to more as a preparedness for the future, and have that readiness to take care of the future requirements of the customer. Last but not the least, when we talk about digital, we talk about investments. Our investments will also going into the cyber securities and the data protection. So the more we are moving towards the digitizations, what thing is important, but we are also focusing out very, very hard on, Jeevan out here is that there should not be any compromise as far as the data securities and the data protection, cyber securities and the data protection comes. So there also requires some investment, which we will be going ahead, making sure that our balance sheet is resilient, and we will be able to take care of any unforeseen circumstances or any eventualities. And when we're really looking into the asset side, one thing is what we are being again trying to work on, and which I think most of my other colleagues will also be doing it, is to have a more assets which are the income earning assets. So why not look into the like at least out here we are being very open, and we have done good amount of whereby whether say for example for any fixed assets, whether we wanted to move it into the OPEX model or onto the completely purchase model. So there are opportunities where we would like to see and make sure that we will have minimum assets which are non-interest earning assets, and that's how we will be able to not only make our balance sheet resilient, but also ensuring that we have the optimum use of the capital and the maximum return on investments.
Okay, noted point. Please go ahead, Mr. Shah.
So from our side, again, being in a business which spans over multiple years, there are 3 or 4 things to really look at and continue to focus on. One is obviously have a capital position which is well and truly above what the regulatory requirement dictates. Second is also ensure that the volatility to that capital is protected by being a very balanced business in terms of the kind of segments that we offer, whether it is protection, pensions, or long-term savings. And each of these have different operating risks. They need to be managed appropriately. We spoke about mortality risk in terms of pandemic. That is something that you can address by ensuring that your estimates are conservative and you are building reserves which are adequate to tide over bad times like these. In terms of investments, you have to ensure that there is a proper asset liability match, whether it is in terms of cash flow matching or duration matching. These techniques are required for different business categories, and that's something that need to be followed. You need to ensure that you stress testing your base case very, very significantly, because these are times in which those will come into the fore. Interest rates are a very, very important component of an insurance company business. Which way they go and what is the kind of impact it will have on your business and your balance sheet and profitability is something that needs to be understood very well. And you need to keep prepared for that as well. And at an operating level, of course, you need to be in a position where you are able to, be flexible and agile to dial down things that, you can wait for and absolutely, go after things that you need to. And that basically, that flexibility is something that comes from a long-term investment that you made in the past, which you can use in difficult times like these. So that's probably it.
Okay, noted your points, Mr. Shah. Mr. Agrawal?
So ours is quite similar to what Upma has explained very nicely, that the kind of requirement, because they being the bank and we being an HFC, more or less these are the requirements for next 2 to 3 years time. So yes, definitely liquidity is a very, very important key factor for the growth, and also maintaining the regulatory capital and as well as the growth capital and raising the capital on time is a very, very key factor for any HFCs. Then in terms of operating level, to keep a very close eye on the cost, cost control, cost of fund, like whenever we are raising the liquidity. Though right now there is a significant drag on our P&L because of the extra liquidity buffer which we are maintaining. So how we can reduce that extra drag, this negative carry, and raise the liquidity with perfect ALM matching, because in HFCs, maintaining ALM is also a big challenge, because most of our borrowings are to the extent of 5 to 7 years, whereas our lending are for 15 to 20 years. So it's a tough challenge in balancing between my lending and my borrowings is a challenge. So we need to keep a close eye on that with the right kind of cost of fund. And in terms of P&L, we can evaluate outsourcing of some of the activities which are not core to us. So thereby we can keep a little drag on the P&L a little lower. So these are the things which I think we need to do in the next couple of years' time.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Mr. Agarwal. Mr. Bhatia?
Okay, so I would touch upon a few things. Basically, in my view, I think cash flows, liquidity, capital structure, P&L projections, these are hygiene. I mean, this is something that you got to maintain, no questions asked, and there needs not be any negative surprises. Besides that, I think there are a few things that we have really focused upon. One is the strategies around leveraging our technology platform. There has been significant investment into the tech platform, and there are more than one ways to make sure that you can continuously monetize what you have created. Number two is we always want to focus on the unit economics at a unit economics level, that these remain positive at all points in time. Number three is the business growth. Of course, you got to see that in a pandemic, how do you grow the balance sheet? And because otherwise you can shrink. The rate of growth is equally important to ensure that there is a consistent year-on-year growth, at a consistent CAGR that you are delivering, in terms of your shareholders' return. And finally, the return on assets and return on equity are the two, key areas for us to monitor as well.
Thanks, Mr. Bhatia. I think that is a very point. Return on equity and return on asset. Actually, that is the front line that comes to the CFO's balance sheet. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatia, for sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much, Ms. Goel, Mr. Shah, and Mr. Agarwal for taking out time and participating in the PPFSI CXO Conclave. I'm sure the participants, and specifically the financial executives and the CFOs and the financial minds, must have got some idea about how to build a pandemic-proof balance sheet from all of you. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and taking part into the PPFSI CXO Conclave.